All right, everyone, we'll kick this off. I want to welcome everyone to this week's Power Up workshop on malware, sandboxes, and Polarity. My name is Blair Gillam. I'm actually the security architect here at Polarity. And one of the many roles I fill in for Polarity is handling potential security issues before they become full-blown incidents. Like every organization these days, we have to deal with phishing, watering hole attacks, and all forms of malware. And as much as I enjoy tweaking email filters and our application whitelisting rules, I got to admit, there's only 24 hours in a day. So I have to be as productive as I can. And to help me quickly triage files that come across my desk every day, I actually leverage Polarity with a combination of integrations, including a couple that leverage publicly available sandboxes. And today I want to walk you through what malware sandboxes are. I'm going to offer 3 tips that I've learned the hard way over the years when dealing with malware sandboxes. And finally, I want to show you how you can quickly triage suspicious files using Polarity. For those of you that have our community edition, you should have preloaded on your CE server our sandboxes integration as well as our hybrid analysis integration. Enterprise customers can actually download both of those from our GitHub page at github.com/PolarityIO. So to kick things off, what are malware sandboxes? If you're not familiar with them, they're a powerful behavior analysis tool for IR investigations or security teams. They allow you to upload a file where it's executed in a virtual environment, and the sandbox observes the behavior and generates a report. And to give you a few examples that are out there, we have hybrid analysis from powered by the CrowdStrike Falcon Sandbox. For folks that are looking for open source solutions that are free, you can set it up on yourself on your own network. There's Cuckoo Sandbox. There's also commercial sandboxes available, both VMware Analyzer as well as Joe Sandbox. And several of these sandbox solutions, they all allow you to quickly triage documents and binaries. And I will say for a small, organization where you have a security team of 1, sandboxes can be a force multiplier. And of all these choices, you have choices between, paid versus free and open source. You also have the option to, run these in the cloud or run them on-prem. So there's a lot of options to fit your environment. The one thing I will say, and my very first tip is when you're looking at these sandbox options, realize that you'll need to leverage a sandbox that emulates your environment as best as possible. So if a sandbox allows you to customize the golden image that it uses to open that malicious Word document or PDF, or execute that binary file that was dropped by PowerShell, the closer you can get that sandbox to your environment, the more useful the information you can extract out of it. And I can tell you I've learned this the hard way, especially when I had a really awesome Cuckoo Sandbox environment set up to deal with Windows 7, both 32 and 64-bit. And the third piece of malware I was given was a Linux binary. So I had all this automation set up to pull apart, basically observe what was going on, all these Yara rules loaded, but I wasn't set up to triage a Linux ELF at that point in time. So again, learn from my experience. Having an environment you can customize is very, very useful. So now that you know what sandbox environments are out there and what some of your options are, let's actually look at how we can speed up this process using Polarity. And full disclosure, the examples I'm going to give today, the file names, hashes, sender email addresses, etc., have all been changed to protect the very guilty. These examples are based on real life cases, but some of the information has been, TLP, yellow, and red. So we've had to find similar examples we can use to showcase how to use the sandbox. So I'm sure if any of you have an EDR set up and you receive alerts, or if your help desk forwards alerts to you provided by users, you might see an email similar to this. In this case, we had a carbon black alert, or one of our EDRs, kick off an alert saying, hey, I saw PowerShell run, but the execution policy, like there was a flag that the policy was bypassed, meaning PowerShell could run any PowerShell script provided to it. So this is usually what we see that kicks off an investigation internally. And we have a hash here. So we hop over into our EDR, basically find that hash, find the exact activity, and look to see what actually occurred. And one of the things we noticed for this particular investigation was, yes, PowerShell ran, yes, PowerShell was whitelisted, but it reached out to the internet and downloaded a second file. Now we don't see any evidence that file actually executing. So that tells me that some of our application whitelisting probably saved us, but we still need to investigate this. And this is actually where Polarity comes into play. So we can extract an actual hash from our EDR system and just do a lookup in Polarity. Let's see what's out there. The nice thing is we have a Sandboxes integration. That's one of the integrations I want to demo for you today. This integration reaches out to 12 different sandboxes, publicly available sandboxes on the internet, and it actually checks for that file hash that you gave it. So in this case, this particular file hash, we actually have a report from any.run, which is an online sandbox, and we have another one from Joe Sandbox. And you'll notice in some cases, any.run actually gives us a hash telling us this is probably the emote malware. Joe Sandbox, we don't really see that hash, but we can pivot directly into the report. And the nice thing about pivoting directly into these reports, I haven't interrupted my day to go and submit the file anywhere. I've just said, hey, we saw this hash. Where else? Has anyone else seen this? I immediately have some confirmation that someone else has seen this hash and they've marked it as malicious. And there's a whole lot of red on my screen of all the signatures of malicious activity that this particular binary has matched in the sandbox. So this gives me a really powerful way of quickly seeing who else has seen that hash. And you'll notice we don't have any hits in virus total for this one. That's because I've disabled virus total for this demo. But if there's other integrations in Polarity where this hash has been seen, those would show up as well. The interesting thing is, as we go through these sandbox reports, they provide a lot of value to us, not only in the signatures that have been noted, but you can also pull down information about, unpacked executables that we're seeing. There's additional activity, different signatures that this binary has flagged on. And I want to actually go down and show you a specific example of how you can leverage Polarity. So right now we've only searched for a hash. But let's say as I'm going through my investigation, I noticed something like a mutex that seems to be unique to this file. But I'm curious if that's a mutex that there may be more information behind it. Maybe this single binary is not a one-off. The nice thing with our Sandboxes integration is you can search for more than just hashes or IP addresses or domains. So in this case, I searched for a single mutex that I saw in a single malicious file. And I have, there's 38 possible documents that were found searching 12 different publicly available sandboxes. So this is very powerful to see whether something is unique to my environment or have other people seen it. Is this, commodity malware, or is it something that's a little bit more intriguing, a little bit more targeted? I clicked on this report because this actually brings me to, tip number 2. I said, basically think beyond file hashes. So when you're using our Sandboxes integration, you can search for mutexes. You can search for other indicators in the Sandbox report that could appear on any of these 12 different sandboxes. This actually leads to tip number 3, which is my trust but verify tip. A sandbox is a tool. It's going to tell you what it sees, but tools can be deceived. So this is a good example where that mutex, which was very specific to a malware family, it actually matches a report of a zip file, something packed inside a zip file that was pulled down from a URL, but that's marked as clean. Even though if we look at the signatures, there's some very telltale indicators that there might be some, anti-reverse engineering or anti-sandbox techniques being engaged. An example is, containing a long sleep, basically going into a loop, waiting for a specific timer to time out before the rest of the malware unpacks itself. And there's also code obfuscation techniques that were noted in the signature. So just because the malware sandbox says, hey, something is clean, or something is very malicious, you always have to investigate it just a little bit further to see what exactly is going on. So this is actually the second example I wanted to show. I'm trying to keep everything within our 15-minute timeline, and I see there are questions coming in, so I'll get to those questions in just a minute. But let me go into another example real quick, and that is, like every company, Polarity is hiring. And as part of our hiring process, we receive resumes and emails from folks all the time submitting their resumes. We had one come in recently where the position they applied for is not a position we offered. And in fact, it originally looked like they had confused us with another company. The file size of the resume was also much larger than what we typically see. So that actually caused a note to go to our security team. We pulled down the attachment from the email, basically just grabbed the hash real quick, did a search for the hash. And, within, you saw less than a second, we actually had a result come back from the publicly available hybrid analysis sandbox, saying that out of 100, this thing had a score of 67 and was malicious. Nice part is, like, this hybrid analysis integration, like, this is separate from our Sandboxes integration, but this is a good example of where you can pivot as you're going through your investigation. So, we have this resume that was submitted, and we can see from the malicious and the suspicious indicators that there's something going on here. Multiple antivirus engines have set this as a malicious, have flagged this file as malicious. We also have an interesting indicator under the suspicious, which is that the document itself contains text, basically telling the user to enable macros. This is a common technique we've seen in a lot of document attachment phishing engagements against us, where if someone downloads a document, they open it up. We have macros disabled by default across the company, but the attacker is trying to entice one of our employees to actually open up this document. And we typically see these come in waves. For us specifically, if we're going through a funding round, or it actually happens right around the time we hire new employees and they update their LinkedIn profile, they start getting phished by someone trying to impersonate our CEO, asking them to open up files, submit paperwork. And it's very obvious it's not our CEO, but it's always fun to get the phone call or the text message saying, hey, Paul's sending me this, but I don't think this doesn't seem right. Like, it's not coming from your the Polarity domain. So this is a great way for us to just quickly triage information. We can actually onboard the employee, show them what we do on the security team. That way they know we're all kind of, one team trying to fight evil. So I'll go ahead and answer some of the questions that have been coming in so far. The first question that's been asked is, what Sandbox integrations are currently supported? The answer to that is, right now, we have a hybrid analysis integration. We also have, VirusTotal has its own sandbox now. So we do support the VirusTotal integration. When you're looking at the actual sandbox integration that's going out, searching the 12 different publicly available sandboxes, I'll show the screenshot real quick of my screen that has the sandboxes that we're currently searching. Now, the nice thing about this integration is you can customize this on your own. If there are other publicly available sandboxes that you want to add to this integration, it's fairly quick and easy to customize it with the search. I also see a question, can you upload to the sandboxes directly from Polarity? That actually gets to a part 2, which we're not going to have time for today. But coming soon, we're actually making changes to some of our integrations. We've already made the changes to VirusTotal, so you can set VirusTotal to notify you that whatever your search was, there were no results returned. So the idea is to give you some sort of indication that, yes, I performed the search, I don't have anything for you. And then you'll have an option coming soon to basically select a file to upload to your sandbox of choice. So we have that all coming down the pipeline. It's not ready for release yet, but we are looking forward to that. Another question we had was, how do you analyze files when you don't want a publicly accessible report? So how we do it internally is we actually have an internal sandbox, Cuckoo Sandbox. We have several virtual machines that mimic different portions of our environment, whether, different OS levels, different patch levels. And what we do is we submit to that sandbox first. We let those reports get generated. And based on the information from those reports, usually we have a good idea, especially with the Yara signatures we use, whether something is malicious or has some other interesting indicators. We can also, get the hashes from those and search in Polarity, have Polarity just search the hashes without submitting the files. But sometimes, we want to do that initial look to see whether this is something of interest or whether, this is just commodity, malware. They're just sending this email to literally hundreds of thousands of people, not worth our time and effort to investigate it further. We're able to say, yes, it's not safe. And we're able to look through our logs, our EDR system, our application whitelisting logs, and say, that didn't actually run on our system. So we feel pretty confident that we're good to go. All right, I want to thank everyone for attending today. I firmly believe malware sandboxes. This was a high-level overview of malware sandboxes and kind of how you can use Polarity to do some of the heavy lifting for your initial triage. Firmly believe that malware sandboxes have helped us in terms of being a force multiplier, allowed us to quickly go through malicious emails, determine where we need to spend our extra time and effort. And then I also hope my 3 tips were useful. Those were, hard-learned lessons over time. Use a sandbox that emulates your environment. And, if you need to, use a sandbox that allows you to customize the gold images. Think beyond file hashes, domains, and IP addresses. If you can search for a mutex and you can find someone else that has reported that as malicious, that allows you to get quicker towards the question of whether something is safe, unsafe. And the third tip, trust but verify. A sandbox is a tool. If it says a file is clean, maybe it is, but you need to kind of look and dig at it a little bit further. There are anti-sandbox techniques using, timers or checking the MAC address of the network adapter. Paranoid Fish is a great example on GitHub. You can search for PA Fish, where they have a lot of anti-sandbox, anti-reverse engineering techniques built into a single binary, where you can actually test your sandbox to see if it hides itself from the malware when it's executing it. So with that, thanks again. I'll stand by a little bit longer if there's any additional questions, but thanks for joining. Oh, got a good question. So I had a question is, what's the best way to do an integration that's not present in Polarity today? I will point you to our GitHub page, github.com/polarityio. This is where we currently list all of our integrations, and it looks like there's approximately 160 or so. What I have found useful, so I actually have created a Cuckoo Sandbox integration. Has not been publicly released yet. I just use it internally. But I have found that if you look through some of the existing integrations, if you can find a good example that uses the same techniques to access, what you're going to be accessing. So if what you want to build an integration for uses a REST API or uses an API that returns, JSON or returns XML, we do have some very good examples in our integrations. A lot of times you can actually copy the integration, change the name, change some of the values on the URL it reaches out to, the full path. You can change the the entity types it would look up, whether it's a domain, IPv4, IPv6, as well as you can change the authentication method. So we might have an integration that authenticates using OAuth, but what you're building the integration for doesn't support OAuth. It supports tokens sent via the header as an HTTP header. So you might be able to actually steal from one of the other existing integrations that uses header cookies to basically just plug and play what you need in order to build the integration. We do also have an SDK, basically documentation, developer documentation on how to build an integration. That's a really good and useful document because it brings in some of the newer features that have been built into the integration framework. Hope that answers your question. Very welcome. You're very welcome. All right, I'll say thank you to everyone. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to our customer success team, or if you're a CE or an enterprise customer, feel free to drop us a line at support@polarity.io. We're always here to help, even if it means helping you with an integration or helping you, implement some new use cases that will be useful in your environment. Thanks again, everyone.